given lengthy jail sentences for scores of crimes against children, including rape and sexual violation. Justice Muir said the offending over 5 years grossly violated society's norm.
It is in fact difficult to imagine more egregious offending against children. Words such as sickening and depraved come readily to mind.
Williams was jailed for 23 years and 5 months with a non-parole period of 9 years and 4 months. Rose got 19 years and 5 months with a non-parole period of 7 years and 9 months. The family of a woman murdered by her partner say she was subjected to violence throughout their short relationship. Palmer Edward Masters has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 12 years for murdering 23-year-old Chantal Wiki O'Brien last November. He was on bail at the time and not supposed to be in contact with her. Some members of Ms Wiki O'Brien's family confronted him in the High Court in Auckland today.
You preyed on her, you manipulated her, you made her live with a life that was not good for her. You used her, you beat her over and over again.
Masters also got a 20-month sentence to be served concurrently for a family violence incident a week before the murder. The Electricity Authority has ordered a review of the power cuts that affected 34,000 people earlier this week. Two small retailers, Haast Energy and Electric Kiwi, have lodged a formal complaint with the industry regulator about Monday night's blackouts. Here's business reporter Anand Zaki.
The authority says it is using its powers to investigate the problem and provide answers to consumers. Chief Executive James Stevenson Wallace says it's disappointed some consumers were left without power on one of the coldest nights this year. The review will first look to see whether the issues that led to the blackouts have been urgently fixed. The second phase will be a wider look, dictated by the initial findings.
Restraints causing injury were highlighted in a report about a Christchurch care and protection residence months before Oranga Tamariki decided to close it. The agency announced Te Oranga would close in July after Newsroom revealed footage of a young person being tackled and restrained. But the Office of the Children's Commissioner highlighted concerns about the facility last December. The Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner, Glenys Philip-Barbara, says worries about all care and protection residences stretch back years.
So we're pleased that action's been taken. But one of the reasons that we decided to publish our monitoring reports from now on is to ensure that there is a much more public eye on the concerns that we have.
Glenys Philip-Barbara wants all such facilities closed. The Taliban say they've captured Afghanistan's second largest city, the second major centre to fall in the past 2 days. Here's the BBC's Anbarasan Iridaran.
Videos posted on social media showed dozens of fully armed Taliban fighters walking through Kandahar. Its capture and that of Herat in the west marked the Taliban's biggest military victories since they started their lightning offensive in May, as foreign forces were preparing to leave the country. The insurgents also claim to have taken Lashkar Gah, the capital of Helmand province. With the Taliban likely to focus on Kabul in the coming weeks, many Afghans on social media said they felt betrayed and let down by the international community.
The Afghan government has yet to confirm whether it has lost control of Kandahar. It's 5:04. To sports now, Wallabies captain Michael Hooper is not expecting to see another shaky kicking performance from first five Noah Lolesio tomorrow night. Lolesio kicked just 2 goals from 12 attempts in windy conditions in his side's 8-point loss to the All Blacks in the opening Bledisloe Cup game last week. The two sides return tomorrow to Eden Park, where the All Blacks can wrap up the Cup again. But Hooper's confident Lolesio will be much improved.
He'll bounce back, and all good 10s will have that game in their career and games like that in their career. So to have a game like that is only going to reaffirm the stuff that it takes for him to become a better player and a better 10.
Meanwhile, former All Black winger Waisake Nahola will make his provincial debut for Canterbury tomorrow. Nahola returned to New Zealand earlier this year after moving to London Irish in 2019, where he played just 4 games due to injury. Former New Zealand cricketer Chris Cairns remains in a serious but stable condition in intensive care at a Sydney hospital. A family spokesperson says there's no change in the condition of the 51-year-old who's had a separate heart operations in Canterbury and Sydney. Japanese Olympic softball gold medalist Miu Goto will be given a new medal because the mayor of her hometown, Nagoya, chomped on the first. He sparked online fury by lowering his mask and biting the medal at an event. He's also been accused of ignoring COVID-19 restrictions. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, jailhouse lawyer Arthur Taylor, who attributes his criminal life to his early experience in a Puni boys' home. James Courage wrote the first gay novel by a New Zealander in 1959. He's been largely forgotten. Now his diaries have been published. And Helen Bint's off-the-grid existence on the Chathams has made her a tourist attraction. Ko Kim Hilaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Strong northwest winds affect many areas tomorrow. For Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, remaining rain, possibly heavy clearing, then mostly fine but isolated showers in the west. Waitonga to Manawatu, including the central high country and Hawke's Bay, fine spells and isolated showers. Wellington and Horowhenua Kapiti Coast, Wairarapa, Marlborough and North Canterbury. Showers, possibly heavy with hail, clearing this evening. Fine for tomorrow until a brief shower in the afternoon or evening. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, a few showers mainly in the north, then rain for a time tomorrow morning and afternoon, possibly heavy and thundery in the west. South Canterbury and Otago fine, apart from scattered rain for a time tomorrow morning and afternoon. Fiordland and Southland mostly fine, apart from showers in Fiordland. Showers and possible thunderstorms for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, rain clearing tonight, returning tomorrow night. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Bye-bye, Bilbo. Amazon Studios is packing up shop and moving production for Series 2 of its multi-billion-dollar Lord of the Rings series to the United Kingdom. The government's taken back the extra incentive offer it signed with the tech giant just a few months ago in response. It's also dashed hopes the show would create thousands of jobs in the film industry here for many years to come. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
The rolling hills, the rugged terrain and towering mountains. New Zealand's dramatic landscape is synonymous with Tolkien's world. Scrap that.
I'm going on an adventure!
Middle-earth is on the move.
I'm really disappointed, I really am.
Season 2 of Amazon's highly anticipated Lord of the Rings series will be produced in the United Kingdom, the new Middle-earth. Production of the first season of what's thought to be the most expensive television show ever made has been underway in New Zealand since the start of last year. It was hoped the series, which will have at least 5 seasons, would be shot entirely in New Zealand. But after post-production wraps up in June next year, the show will up sticks. Amazon says the decision aligns with the studio's plan to grow its presence in the UK. The decision disappointing the government here. It's withdrawn part of the deal to support the show, an extra 5% incentive, or roughly $33 million. That's on top of the standard 20% rebate on qualifying production spending in this country under the terms of the International Screen Production Grant.
We still, I think, got incredible value for money. It's just a shame that this won't continue.
There's been some suggestion New Zealand's strict border rules and the logistical challenges that created for international crew contributed to Amazon's decision to shift the production. Economic Development Minister Stuart Nash says that's simply not the case.
I mean, we haven't got COVID in our country. Where would you rather work, in a country that's full of COVID or a country with no COVID?
National's Todd McLeay says the minister bungled negotiations with Amazon, meaning the New Zealand economy will now miss out on billions.
The taxpayer has shelled out more than $130 million to Amazon for this first series, and the minister couldn't even be bothered asking them to stay in New Zealand. They're off to the UK.
Production of the first season has created more than 2,000 jobs, and it was hoped further seasons would provide countless jobs for the better part of a decade. New Zealand Film Commission Chief Executive David Strong says the move is a hit for the industry.
We're feeling at the moment for our industry, they've worked hard. A lot of them have put a lot of heart and soul into this. A lot of vendors have invested in supporting this. So right now, they're at the forefront of our minds.
David Strong doesn't expect other major production companies working in New Zealand will follow suit and shift overseas. He says New Zealand remains an attractive location for the industry.
The Christchurch Mayor is nervous about how the city will pay for an upsized multi-use arena, but believes it's what residents want. Christchurch City Council yesterday backtracked on a decision to downsize the soon-to-be-constructed arena to 25,000 seats and thereby stick within budget. The council says it will add $50 million to the budget, bringing it to more than $500 million. But as Rachel Graham reports, it's not entirely sure where the money will come from.
Over the last month, pressure has grown on city councillors to rethink the plan to cut seat capacity at the new stadium, including from a 24,000 signature petition. Out on the streets of Christchurch today, there's nothing but support for the move to go back to the 30,000 seating.
Do it once, do it right. Looking in the future, once the border is open, God knows how many people will come to Christchurch.
I think they should never have even decided to go to 25. This council needs to become a lot braver. Why has it taken so many years to get anything done around here?
Yes, I think it was a good idea. The community had obviously made it pretty clear that was something that was important to them.
It'd be nice for them to make a decision once and get it right and actually do something. But it's now, 2021, and the earthquakes were a long time ago. It's just time to start doing stuff. It doesn't matter if it's 25 or 30. Either the stadium with either of those capacities is better than no stadium or the one we've got at the moment.
The chair of the Christchurch Central City Business Association, Annabelle Turley, says their members are thrilled with the backtrack by the council. She says many inner city businesses have invested in anticipation of the flow-on from the multi-use arena, which was initially going to seat 35,000 people and be built in 2017. She says business owners were angry to hear it had been downsized.
It's massive. These weekends that they have at other, for example, down at Forsyth Bar, when they have a concert, it's like Boxing Day sale on steroids. So it's actually really significant to have some bumper weekends to hold you over the times like now when it's a bit cold, people don't like going outside. So it's so important.
In July, council staff warned that if they stuck with the 30,000 seat plan, the cost would go $88.8 million over budget, and the council voted in favour of making the cut. 5 councillors voted against the proposal at that stage, including councillor Sam McDonald, who publicly questioned the sums. That proved to be correct, with the staff revising the extra cost of the 5,000 seats down to $50 million. Sam McDonald doesn't want to dwell on the changing price tag and is just glad they've got a good outcome.
Look, let's be very, very clear. We're not increasing the size. If anything, we're decreasing it from what the blueprint had promised after the earthquake. So originally it was 35,000. We've come back to 30,000. And there was a staff recommendation a couple of weeks ago to reduce that even further. So we're literally delivering what we promised the people of Christchurch at 30,000.
Mayor Leanne Dalzell says the initial advice was put together quickly when staff were advised to come up with a proposal within budget. But on the second vote, they were able to get more information. She says it became clear the public didn't want a reduction in seats. Ms Dalzell says the issue now will be how to raise the extra funds needed.
I feel a bit nervous about going into the future without knowing exactly where the money's coming from, but I heard a really strong and powerful commitment from our city to make that contribution available, and whether that's an element on rates, whether that's an element on other models of funding. I just think that the door is now open to us. We got a very clear message from our community that they're willing to contribute to make this work.
Leanne Dalzell says she can reassure people this decision is final and there will be no more votes on seats.
Flip-flopping advice from several government agencies has given Port of Tauranga plenty of headaches this week. A red alert went up about a foreign-flagged ship, the Rio de la Plata, heading into Tauranga early last week. Maritime New Zealand was warned an Australian pilot had been on board who later tested positive for the Delta variant of COVID-19. After several flip-flops from New Zealand government agencies, the ship docked in Tauranga. Unloading started, stopped and restarted and then stopped again, with initially more than 90 port workers forced to isolate and get tested for the virus. 11 of the 21 crew on the foreign freighter tested positive for COVID. All the port workers have returned negative tests. David Pilkington is the chair at the Port of Tauranga and joins me now. Good evening, David. It sounds really complicated. What went wrong here? Who let you guys down?
Good evening, Lisa. Well, I think you've given a very good explanation of what happened. It was exactly that: a on again, off again, leave the ship out, no, bring it in, stop work, no, start work, and as a consequence, of course, those people got exposed. But it was very frustrating to have a number of government agencies involved and a number of mixed messages. And frankly, we can't continue to keep having these mistakes because, dare I say it, we dodged another bullet.
How clear was the message you were getting from these various agencies and who was in charge?
The messages were quite clear in terms of, hold the ship, no, the ship is clear. Initially, as you described, Maritime New Zealand got the advice. They discussed the situation with the Ministry of Health, and the investigation carried out said no, while the pilot in Australia had contracted the virus, he had done so before or after boarding the ship in Australia. So rather than consider that the pilot may well have contracted the virus on the ship, the advice was, no, it's all clear, the pilot was not infectious at the time he was on the ship. Well, that was clearly incorrect. And then we got the subsequent message once that emerged, no, hold the ship, take it out. And as I say, it was, if we'd have known, if a thorough investigation had been carried out in the first instance, it would have been determined high risk because the pilot was positive. The obvious conclusion was that the crew on the ship may have been infected and given him the virus. And of course, we would have held the ship and no one would have come into contact with it.
So, David, who should have made that call? Whose shoulders does this, well, it's a botcher, rest on?
I think the problem is we have a number of agencies involved and, we have a situation where I think all of the agencies are trying to do the best job they can, but you're dealing with people, take the Ministry of Health, for example. They are a policy ministry and they're not an operational ministry. And I know a number of people have made a call to say, look, this whole thing should be handled by a specialist group of people. But you've got a number of agencies trying to talk to each other. You've got jurisdiction issues between DHBs and the public health unit on the ground. You've got a whole lot of people involved, and the opportunities for mixed messaging in those situations is obvious. So it is very frustrating, and we've been assured since by parties that we need to sit down and we need to do this better.
How do you feel about the fact that a considerable number of workers at the port were exposed to a very real danger?
My main concern lies with the pilots that board the ship, because the stevedores that work the ship don't come into contact with ship's crew. So the only way they could contract the virus is from surface contact on the ship. And if you imagine a large container ship, salt encrusted, working that ship, the chances of them picking up COVID off a surface is very, very slim. But it's the pilot that goes on board the ship and has the contact with the crew that is the vulnerable point. And in this case, the 11 ship's crew that tested positive. 2 of those crew were actually bridge staff. So it was really a testament to our pilots. I mean, they obviously wear PPE. They're well decked out. They're very conscious of the risk. But it was really a testimony to their thoroughness that he managed to get on that ship alongside the infected crew, bring it in and get off the ship without contracting the virus. Whereas if you compare that with the Australian pilot, he got on the ship and got off the ship with the virus. So I really can't say enough about the quality of the pilots we've got operating that process. But as I say, it is high risk.
David, in a sentence, sum up how well you think those government agencies did in handling this.
Oh. It's very easy to be critical, Lisa, and I would say that they've simply got to do better. This is not good enough, because if we keep going on like this, we're going to run out of luck sooner or later.
Do you think that the crew on board the Rio de la Plata should have been tested earlier? Because it seems like that happened quite a way down in the process.
Yeah, what should have happened is that the link with the pilot in Australia, as soon as he tested positive, the ship should have been held off and crew tested before the ship was allowed to have any contact with any of the New Zealand personnel.
David, we're almost out of time, but just very quickly, have you got any assurances that this is all going to change and you're not going to have the same sort of bumbling around exercises you've had here?
Well, we're getting positive messages that everyone recognises that we have to improve the systems, but we've been at this a fair while now, Lisa. It's late in the day to be saying we still haven't got the systems down pat. I think we need to do better.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for joining us. That is David Pilkington, who's the chair at Port of Tauranga. It is 22 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e Heidi Aki nei. We'll have more on the CRL and those businesses waiting for compensation. Part of the puzzle of reconnecting to the world is how international arrivals are going to be filtered into the country. Under the government's plan, the drawbridge will be lowered in the first few months of next year, but arrivals will be split into 3 groups depending on where they're coming from. Those from low-risk countries will be free to roam. Medium risk will have a shorter MIQ stay or a home self-isolation setup. And those from high-risk countries will be straight on a bus to MIQ. So in practical terms, how will that actually work? Ko taku manuhiri I nei ko Adrian Littlewood. Adrian is the boss at Auckland Airport and he joins me now. Adrian, is this as complicated as it seems?
Well, we're starting to work that through. I mean, we've been living with, I guess, 2 primary zones, the health management zone and the quarantine-free zone for some time now, since the Tasman opened up. Obviously, that's back on pause, other than the Cook Islands traffic, which is still happening. But we've sort of got used to working and operating that model for some time, but obviously a three sort of level model is a new development, and we are at work starting to think about what that looks like.
Can you do that at one airport, or is it likely that the best case scenario would be to say Airport A deals with low, B is medium and C is high risk? Or can you cope with all of that in Auckland?
I think we probably can. It very much depends on volume, though, and naturally MIQ sort of inbound typically is low volume, high touch, and therefore that is a slower process. I think the thing we need to figure out is obviously when you start to add volume to a process, particularly medium or the orange medium risk category, if you want to call it that has a different overlay to it. Obviously, the government's plan focuses very heavily on vaccinated travellers, so obviously vaccines and vaccine verification and validation will be critical to all levels. But the good news is the industry's worked quite hard on getting travel passes organised and working with governments around the world. So actually that path is pretty well clear. It's probably the middle category, the medium risk category, that needs a bit more work.
So you're going to have to keep all these passengers separate, right, as they come in. And it seems that people are going to have a rapid test when they arrive at the airport. Not sure how long it takes for a result to be returned, but presumably people are going to need waiting areas and to be separated. Is this going to add to costs and overheads? And who's going to end up paying for that?
Well, it does today, and it will. We have to be clear about that. I think, look, the whole answer has to be solved yet. I mean, the pathway was only laid out yesterday by the Prime Minister. I think we need to dig in deep, and we are working very close with airlines, airports, and government agencies and starting to design that work. But one of the most important things that was announced yesterday that certainly we've been very keen on for some time now has actually been quite a structured way to look at testing technology. Again, we were early in the saliva test concept and got that going with trials here, but there are a vast number of different trials happening around the world. I know, for example, in Singapore they've pre-authorised and are looking at rapid breath tests that can be very accurate. So we'd like to see that work accelerated very, very quickly so the scan across testing tech is available to provide assurance to people travelling through the border.
The Prime Minister's talked about yesterday in her speech getting together a group of industry leaders, airport airlines, and giving them 8 weeks to work through the potential fish hooks. I'm also wondering about routing of flights, right? So if you have flights that go through a number of countries, obviously countries are going to have different risk levels and the flights pick up passengers on the way. Do you think we're going to see a different way of flying and different routes?
Yeah, that's quite possible in the early days, particularly, I think, as the different country-by-country treatments emerge. I think it's going to be clunky getting out of this before it starts to settle down. But ultimately, if you think about it, really what you want is passengers getting on board a flight having a common characteristic or cohorting. So you've got a flight with known characteristics, i.e. they're vaccinated, they've had pre-travel tests and other assurance before they get on that flight. That means then processing becomes easy at the arriving port. This details ought to be worked out, but as I said, we are working closely on that 8-week program. We're going fast on that to try and prove in and give some proposals for the government to consider.
Are you buoyed by what you've heard and what is coming?
Well, I think after 19 months of this, we have to sort of look forward and look optimistically at this. I think we've said that the vaccine program now hitting pace and scale is actually giving us a chance to actually plan ahead. That's why earlier this week we talked about restarting our infrastructure plan and looking at the other side. And so I think we have to have some confidence from that. We've got the business traveller trial coming later this year. This will allow certain systems to be tested, which is good. And in a way, airlines have almost tested that through their pilot management scheme in the last little while coming through the airport. So, look, we know a lot about the system. We're joining all the different parts of the system, whether they're government, airlines or airports in this, and I'm confident we'll come up with some answers.
I know you're reliant on the vaccination rollout and the decisions the government makes, but in terms of practical considerations and logistics, if you get the go-ahead, how soon could you have a system set up to accommodate the requirements of the government's roadmap?
Well, like everything as it attaches to aviation, it's not one organisation. We can take care of our part, but that will depend on system design. But there are many other parts that are contingent. Many of those parts rest with government and government agencies. The Prime Minister talked about traveller declaration and testing information, certificates. Those things are all critical parts. The airlines have worked very hard with the IATA travel pass, another part of the puzzle. So it's a little bit like an orchestra, making the whole system work, and you've got to have some coordination through all that. So I think the 8-week program is the path to get that defined as quickly as possible and join those different threads together so that, as a combined system, we can deliver something that has assurance attached for the travelling public and for New Zealanders.
Thanks for joining us, Adrian. That's Adrian Littlewood, who is the boss at Auckland Airport. It is 28 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ho mai o whakaaro. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Let us know what you think of, Lord of the Rings packing up, taking the ring, the set, everything, going back to the UK. They said that, about half of their actors were UK-based and they're leaving. And that's it for us. Pātuhi mai. Text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Remembering they've had significant tax breaks for filming here. Tickets to what could be the All Blacks' last home test of the year are being given away. The ABs are due to play the Wallabies this Saturday at Auckland's Eden Park. Its second game in the 3-test Bledisloe series. A freeze on the quarantine-free travel bubble with Australia meant the schedule was rejigged with 2 games a week apart in Auckland before the All Blacks head to Perth, with an unknown return date due to games in the US and UK and MIQ constraints. Today, Sky customers are being offered a 2-for-1 ticket deal for tomorrow's game, underlining slow sales. So who's actually going to the game? Reporter Louise Tanuth hit the streets to find out.
No, I'm not.
Why not?
Just little one keeps me at home, but hard to get out at night time, or whatever time it is.
Do you like the All Blacks?
Yes, love the All Blacks.
Yeah. And can you name 3 of the current players in the squad?
Oh, no. Bowden Barrett, maybe another Barrett brother, and what's his name? TJ Perenara.
No, I'm not going to the rugby. No, sorry. Why not?
I didn't even know it was on,
Me neither.
Yeah.
Do you like the All Blacks?
Yeah.
I think I'm more interested. I love rugby, but I'd love to watch more women playing rugby. Well, women's sports in general.
Yeah.
And can you name 3 players in the squad?
Oh, I like, is it Richie Mo'unga?
While you do this, I should Google.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I'm not, no, sorry.
Why not?
Well, I just haven't booked a ticket, no.
Do you think the tickets are too expensive?
Oh, not really sure how much are they at the moment, I don't know. How much are they?
Yeah, they're 2-for-1 at the moment for Sky users.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Does that change your mind?
Oh, it might do, yeah.
Do you like the All Blacks?
Yeah, I love the All Blacks.
Yeah. Can you name 3 players in the squad?
No. Don't have the money for that.
Tickets are too expensive?
Nah.
I want to drink at home.
Yeah. Did you know it was on?
No.
It's the Bledisloe Cup, so it's the last game on home turf. It's quite a big deal. I mean, do you like the All Blacks?
No, I don't really follow rugby.
And joining me now is the CEO of Eden Park, Nick Sortner. Hi, Nick. How full is the stadium for the game?
Well, kia ora and thanks for your time. We're still expecting a big crowd, but it'll be well short of last week. The combined probably attendance will be in excess of 70,000, and I'm just encouraging fans, people in Auckland, this is potentially the last chance this year to see the All Blacks on home soil. We've done the work. People all around the world would love to be in stadiums experiencing live sport. And Kiwis have got an opportunity tomorrow night. We've only got 24 hours until kick-off. So tickets are really reasonably priced. There's for kids from $25. You mentioned about the 2-for-1 deal with Sky customers. So take the opportunity to see the national team at the National Stadium.
So if you're expecting 70,000 across 2 games, that means, I'm just done quick calculation in my head, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you're only expecting 20-odd thousand people tomorrow.
Oh, I think we'll get more than 20,000 tomorrow, but from our side...
You got 47,000 last week, didn't you? And you're saying you're going to get probably 70 across 2, so that's quite a small crowd, isn't it, Nick?
I said in excess of 70,000, and I think from our perspective, it's been a challenge, obviously, with 7 days, under 7 days to sell 45,000 tickets. The reality is there's an opportunity still in market for people to attend the fixture, and we're delighted to be able to host the second Bledisloe. It's been 35 years since the All Blacks have lost at Eden Park, and we hope the Fortress, and we continue on with that winning streak.
Nick, you touched on it a little bit there, but can you just explain to me in more detail, because I don't get this right. This is the All Blacks in a Bledisloe Cup game. Why can't you coax people out?
It's perplexing. I think we've got this opportunity. It's the team of 5 million have done the work to keep COVID out. And as I say, venues around the world have been starved of content or fans. And it'd be great for people to probably realise and appreciate that this is unique to New Zealand and Auckland, and to get online and buy tickets.
Have the All Blacks lost their magic?
Oh, I don't think so. As someone who is now lived in New Zealand for 5 years, has got 2 Kiwi daughters, seeing the All Blacks do a haka on Eden Park and a bilingual national anthem, I think is one of the most special sporting events that you can experience. So I don't think so, and I think people aren't disappointed when they see them perform at the Fortress.
So this 2-for-1 deal with tickets, in essence, you're giving away tickets to this game and you still can't fill the stadium.
Well, we've done a number of promotions. We obviously feel for our friends down in Wellington who weren't able to host the fixture this week. So Air New Zealand had put on additional flights to get people to fly up from Wellington. So we always, whether it be for 660, for an art show or the All Blacks, there'll always be options and ticket offers in market. And this was an initiative with Sky Television to get people along to the fixture, and I'm very supportive of it.
Hey, Nick, you mentioned 660 there. They were able to sell that stadium out in an absolute flash. So do you need more concerts and less rugby?
Well, we'd love to have more concerts, and obviously the borders provide challenges at the moment. But, we were able to get that 50-odd thousand. It's the biggest concert globally post-COVID, and some of that imagery went around the world, and same with the fixture last week. You saw in Australia they were talking about bringing the NRL Grand Final to New Zealand, given their venues are closed and obviously in lockdown.
So is it easier for you to fill a stadium with music fans than it is to fill a stadium with All Blacks fans?
Well, it's a tough question. I've only ever had one concert, but maybe in 3 years' time, after 18 shows, we'll be able to have that conversation. But we're just looking forward to the first test was sold out. Obviously, 6 days to sell 45,000 tickets is always going to be a challenge. But we just encourage sports fans or fans in general to get out and experience live sport and entertainment, that escapism that we can provide.
What is the split with the gate takings? Who gets what, and where does that leave you if you're down in people attending?
Oh, as you can imagine, there's commercial sensitivities, but
just generally the split. I'm not asking you how much you get out of it as in the actual number, but between you and NZR, what is it, 50-50, 60-40, 80-20?
There's a variety of commercial models that are involved in hosting fixtures, but what I would say is that, generally speaking, Dominion Road sees a 500,000 increase in spend for those businesses. We know that in Kingsland and Dominion Road, COVID has hit hospitality hard, and they're just very appreciative of events being held in Auckland at Eden Park, and we just encourage people to get to the venue early, spend in the local area and be part of the community.
Well, Nick, let me put it another way. Based on the figures that you're giving me around attendance across both games, will you be out of pocket for tomorrow's game?
Oh, certainly not. No. This delivers significant economic benefit for Eden Park, but also for Auckland. Our members and partners have supported us through COVID, and this is a wonderful recognition for them to be able to come along to this fixture. Obviously, with the Argentinian fixture not being able to be held, given the pause with the Australian travel, this is a reward for our members, and they're very excited to be coming along tomorrow.
So you got a ticket, Nick?
I'm certainly going along and bringing the family along too.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. That is the CEO of Eden Park, Nick Sortner. E te iwi e haere ake nei I a checkpoint. The Kiwis the government's left out as it begins to reconnect to the world. The school kids boosting New Zealand's housing stock and their CVs. And are Australia's lockdowns actually working? Homai o whakaaro. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. The Port of Tauranga chairman says the country dodged a bullet with the conflicting messages from government agencies about whether stevedores should work a ship that had COVID-19 infected crew members on board. Nearly 100 port workers came into contact with the Delta variant infected crew members and were told to go home and get tested. They'd initially been told to stay away before they were told to go back on board. The port company's chairman, David Pilkington, told Checkpoint there was confusion because of the number of agencies involved in the decision-making at the border. Meanwhile, the former chief executive of the Ports of Auckland, Tony Gibson, is facing 2 health and safety charges brought by Maritime New Zealand following the death of a stevedore last August. A Cambridge couple's sexual abuse of children over 5 years has been described as grossly violating the norms of society. In the High Court at Rotorua today, 54-year-old Andrew Allen Williams and 32-year-old Laken Marie Rose were given lengthy jail sentences for scores of crimes against children, including rape and sexual violation. The detective who led the investigation into the pair says he's never seen such a volume of offending. The Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner says the fact concerns were raised last year about a Christchurch care and protection facility highlights they should all be shut down. Oranga Tamariki announced the Christchurch facility, Te Oranga, would close in July after footage emerged of a young person being tackled and restrained. And the Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner, Glenys Philip Barbara, says worries about all care and protection residences stretch back years. Film Otago Southland says New Zealand's COVID restrictions are probably forcing productions to other countries. While New Zealand's COVID-free status once attracted productions, Film Otago Southland's chair, Brad Perndau, says the competitive advantage had now gone because of the restrictions. It's 5:40. We'll have more news and sports at 6.
Thanks, Marama. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Kei kōna, Nona Peltier, me nau kaupapa kai Pakehi. Nona's here to talk about all things business. Oh, let's start with Air New Zealand, right? We're talking about the roadmap to reopening the borders. It's deferring its planned capital raise, which was expected to get underway next month. What's going on?
So it's been deferred before as well. This time it's being deferred, well, I guess the same story really, is the Minister of Finance, who's responsible for Air New Zealand's, I guess, the share that the government holds as a majority shareholder, has said that we want to defer because there's still a lot of uncertainty, that the situation isn't stable. So we want to defer the capital raise till we know what is going to be required to recapitalise the company. And he's expecting, this is Grant Robertson, is expecting that's going to happen in the first quarter of next year.
So the context is that obviously the government is looking to buy in to that capital raise because it wants to maintain its 52% shareholding, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Very good. Sorry. You want to sit here, Lisa?
No, that's too hard.
Awesome.
But basically, it's going to have to cough up to keep it.
Yes, that's right. And because
keep its hold on the company.
Yeah, and because it's uncertain, it could be that the company goes to the market, gets the money, and then things don't materialize in the way or develop in the way that we expect. I mean, we thought that we would have a bubble with Australia. Well, we don't. So these are the kinds of things that can really change the situation for Air New Zealand. So what Grant Robertson is saying is that it's still too uncertain. We need more time before we decide. And that's where things are at. But look, the market was happy with that. They think that's a good idea. And so Air New Zealand's share price rose 1% today as a result of that. So that was a good decision. The market thought that was the right call.
Let's talk about house prices, because apparently fresh analysis says they're going to fall over the next couple of years.
Yes.
Who says that? No.
Well, it's a company called Jarden, and they're quite a big brokerage firm, financial advisement, investment, a big company. They did some analysis of the housing market, and they think that house prices are going to drop 6% next year and 3% the following year, which is quite a lot.
Yeah,
and
significant amount.
And that means that if you bought a house today, what they're suggesting is that you would basically lose on the value of it. Now, they're saying they don't want to alarm the market. This all depends on what the Reserve Bank governor decides, or the Reserve Bank decides this coming week on official cash rates. If the cash rate is risen quite substantially, rises over the next year to say 2% or what have you, this would have a material effect on mortgages, and therefore could change the desire for people to own a home. And what Jarden, the analyst involved, said is the trigger point is the day that people who don't have a home or are looking to upgrade lose that fear of missing out. And that's going to be the trigger for the turn in the market. So when people no longer fear that or feel the need to buy a property at any cost, that's going to be when the market changes. And he's saying, and it could be substantial. But however, even if you paid whatever you pay for your house this year and the prices fell 6%, According to their analysis, your house would still be overvalued by about 10% if you were a new homeowner, and about 16% if you were an investor in some other kind of property.
Okay, let's do a whiz around the markets, Nona.
Yeah, so look, the Asian equity markets were not very buoyant this and not following up on the record highs that we've seen overseas. However, Australia and New Zealand have bucked that trend, and we rose nearly 0.2% today. That's an 82-point gain to 12,764. And our Kiwi is quite steady, considering the strength of the US dollar. We're still at 70.1 US cents. And against the Australian, we're exactly where we were yesterday, 95.5 Australian and 50.7 pence. So not moved a bit.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business. And a warning, this next story may be distressing to some. A couple who sexually abused children have been described as sickening and depraved as they were sentenced to long prison terms. Andrew Allen Williams, who's 54, received a sentence of 23 years, 5 months, with a non-parole period of 9 years, 4 months. 32-year-old Larkin Marie Rose was given 19 years, 5 months and must serve 7 years, 9 months before parole can be considered. Nei te Kairi Poata and Andrew McRae nor Rotorua.
The now former couple were active within the equestrian world, and the offending took place either at their Cambridge property or further afield, including the home of one victim. Andrew Allen Williams was convicted on 56 charges involving 7 children, and Larkin Marie Rose, 55, relating to 4 children. The children range in age from 3 to 14. The multiple charges cover a range of offences, including rape, unlawful sexual connection, indecent assault and making objectionable publications. Justice Muir said the scale of their offending was almost unprecedented.
It is in fact difficult to imagine more egregious offending against children. Words such as sickening and depraved come readily to mind.
He said the two worked together, quoting one text from Williams to Rose.
Mr. Williams, the ages 1 to 4, no talking. Rose, yeah babe, that's the ages I want, and really you can just do whatever you want to them.
Justice Muir said all of the victims were highly vulnerable on account of their ages.
The impacts of the offending are already apparent here in psychological trauma, attempted self-harm, and feelings of parental guilt. The latter born of a belief, incorrect but nevertheless understandable, that the parents concerned could have done more to protect their children. It may be many years yet before the full extent of the harm is identified. It can only be hoped infantile amnesia affords them some protection later in life.
The parent of one child read her victim impact statement in court, eyeballing both Williams and Rose at times. She spoke of the devastating effects the crime has had on her family. Her words are revoiced.
Taking your child to a rape examination is an experience I wish on no other parent. Done so incredibly kindly, you would almost think you were there for a routine checkup. Except you, as their parent, know why you were there, and that gravity sits over you like an uncomfortable, hot, heavy jacket.
She said it has left her with so many unanswered questions.
What could I have done differently? Why did I not hear something? Why did I not see? Why my child?
She said the innocence of the children was so casually taken.
I will never understand, Mr. Williams, why you did not seek help. Rather, you chose to destroy and violate our children instead. I will never understand how you, an adult female, Ms. Rose, put these precious, beautiful, innocent, trusting children in a dangerous predator's hands.
She described what the two did as nothing short of monstrous. Speaking outside of court, Detective Sergeant Daryl Brazier from the Child Protection Team described it as a complex and difficult investigation that had a huge volume of distressing material.
The offending by Rose and Williams has had a horrendous impact on the victims and their families. While nothing can reverse the terrible ordeal the victims and their families have suffered, I hope that the sentencing today helps provide a small measure of comfort to them.
Detective Sergeant Brazier says it was the worst possible violation of children that can be imagined. He says it's highly unusual for a woman to be involved.
Very seldom, I think, in history have we seen a female who is involved with so much offending as a principal offender, as opposed to a party. Well, Rose was a principal offender. So she was not only grooming these children, but she was actively participating in the violation of some of them.
He's in no doubt that had the families not come forward when they did, and the police act, the two would still be in the community offending against vulnerable children.
Some people trying desperately to return to New Zealand feel like they've been missed out by the government's latest border announcements. The government plans to ease open the borders from early next year, and travellers will face different requirements based on their risk level. But there's still no wiggle room in the ironclad borders for urgent returnees. Kim Moody reports.
Alexandra Burt is a New Zealand lawyer living in London. She says the latest announcement raises more questions than answers. She's part of a group called the Grounded Kiwis, who have a petition before Parliament calling for an overhaul to the MIQ system. Alexandra drafted the group's petition and says she welcomes the plan to allow some vaccinated people to isolate at home and a risk-based approach for returnees. But she says her heart sank at yesterday's news.
To be honest, we were a bit dismayed because the announcements all relate to 2022 and the future in some unknown point in time, but don't seek to address any of the fundamental issues with MIQ that we're seeing at the moment.
Alexandra says New Zealanders needing to come home urgently are still struggling to get an exemption.
We heard nothing in the announcement yesterday about whether there's going to be any changes to the emergency allocation process. For others who do meet the criteria, they can't get in because there's not enough space. Again, nothing was said about whether there's going to be increased space for these people in these emergency situations.
And for Kiwis overseas trying to nab an MIQ spot in the notoriously overloaded booking system, there's no relief.
What a lot of New Zealanders feel is that there is a plan that's great, but what about the current state? What is the government going to do right now? And that's what people were saying. They sort of said, oh, what was the point of me sitting through 2 hours of that announcement because nothing's changed.
There are some trying to head in the other direction, but have no guarantee of being able to get a bed on the way back. Auckland resident Mike Moore's among thousands of people hitting dead ends, trying to book a spot in managed isolation. His brother, who lived in the United Kingdom, died unexpectedly a few months ago, and he wants to support his family in person. But with no available spots in MIQ and no guarantee of when he could return, he's holding off on booking. He says he's resigned himself to the fact that he won't be able to visit his family anytime soon.
This proposal that you just keep on checking a website which never has availability is like inviting you to go into a tunnel that has no end to it. And as if you have nothing better to spend your life doing than battering away on a website in the vain hope of finding some availability.
Mike says the MIQ system is bottlenecked and more spaces need to be opened up.
If there are no rooms in the inn, there are no rooms in the inn, right? It doesn't matter what mechanisms you provide around that. The fundamental problem is the funnel is completely full.
But the New Zealand Aged Care Association's given the new measures a tentative thumbs up. Chief Executive Simon Wallace says staff are critically needed on the front line.
We have 350 nurses waiting overseas who've got job offers to work in aged care in New Zealand, and we think that the self-isolation plan for New Zealanders will allow more space to be freed up in MIQ for those international nurses.
Simon Wallace says he's approached the government asking for spots in MIQ to be ring-fenced for medical staff working in aged care.
A lot of feedback from you all about the All Blacks game in Auckland at Eden Park tomorrow. They seem to be having problems selling tickets. They're doing a 2-for-1 deal. Pete says the game should have been in Wellington. I'd be there for sure. You know you can visit, Pete. And then someone else says, got 4 tickets earlier this week, $80 per adult, $25 per child. Total cost, $210 for the family. Those were cheap tickets, this person says. Other tickets were $100 per adult. Compared with the Auckland Blues at $30 an adult, $15 a kid, it's not the All Blacks who have lost popularity. The tickets are too expensive for many, this listener says. Brian of Ngamotu says rugby's been in decline for 3 decades. Free tickets says it all. Should have had it in Wellington, this listener says. All Blacks are a national team, not a Jaffa fest. Would have been a sellout. Ooh, vicious. Someone else has said Wellington would have filled the cake tin given the chance. No comment on Jaffas. Common theme, it seems. And then Dave says, just looked at the price of tomorrow's Bledisloe Cup tickets. Too rich for my blood, says Dave. Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 6 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, the Auckland businesses ending up in financial holes because of the CRL. Students at Dargaville High School are swapping the classroom for a construction site to build desperately needed public houses for the north. The school is churning out beautifully made homes for the rohi, and the students making them have been bitten by the building bug. Our cameraman Nick Munro and reporter Nita Blake-Person went to check out their mahi.
The usual classroom chorus sounds a little different here at Dargaville High. Across the school field and away from its main building sits the Building Academy. Here science labs are out and handsaws are in.
Classroom, not for me. Not school at all. But building, yeah, it's good.
Way funner and more practical.
It's like a job. It's like, you're out doing a job and it's nothing like what the classrooms would provide.
About 10 kids each year get to be a part of this program, which operates during school hours but is essentially a full-time building site. They're often students who haven't been particularly interested in school, but the building work gives them a massive boost. Everyone gets their own gear bag when they start, containing about $1,000 worth of tools to get them going.
Tool belt with hammer, rulers, squares, knives, yeah.
Is it pretty much everything that you'd need to get started?
Yep, pretty much.
It can be a steep learning curve though. Academy tutor Tim Pratt says when they arrive, many kids don't know how to hold a hammer, let alone use one.
The first 6 weeks we're trying to keep them alive. They don't realise that everything every tool we use can cut them, maim them, cut off limbs and kill them, and it's a very stressful time for us.
But it doesn't take them long to find their feet.
Once they get to know the tools, the transformation, well, amazing.
The reason it's hard to get out is because they're ring-shank nails.
Tim Pratt started the program 10 years ago. A generous local donor helped them with their first homes, but these days they're financing the whole thing themselves. Nearly 80 students have passed through, 41 are in the trades and 3 run their own businesses. He says the scheme is a great solution to help ease the country's housing crisis.
There's not enough builders in New Zealand to build 40,000 houses a year, and they couldn't do it anyway now. But, we're doing our little bit, and that's what I wanted to do, and it's great. You see the gratitude on these people's faces when they move into their house. It's just amazing.
Having the program here means the students get all the NCEA credits they need, but also vital building skills for an apprenticeship should they want it. Caleb Cranston says it's been awesome.
Building Academy will put you into apprenticeship jobs throughout the future, and it will help you. It's like a jump starter, Building will help you.
Today he's helping put some final touches on a house which isn't far off heading to its new kāinga order tenants.
I enjoy it. It's just brings joy to me, even knowing that I can help people and give them a house, give them a roof to live under. Yeah.
Does it make you excited for what you could do after school?
Oh yeah, definitely. yeah, it gives me butterflies sometimes, yeah.
Kāinga Order began buying the homes the school makes at the end of last year. Another 5-bedroom place was taken up to Kaitaia this week. As well as pumping out houses, the Academy is also adding to Aotearoa's much-needed trades teams. Caleb's already eyeing up what's next.
I love building in general. My dream was to be able to build my own houses in the future and that.
And others have similar plans.
The dream is to get a building company by myself after a couple of years.
Building in Whangarei or Dargaville, just wherever there's the job.
Dargaville High is the second school to be building homes for Kāinga Ora. Massey High in Auckland are also helping out. It's a program the students here hope can be extended nationwide in a bid to help nail Aotearoa's housing shortage.
And if you were listening to that piece on radio, do go online and check out Nita and Nick's story there, and you can check out some of the handiwork from those builders. A lot of feedback around sports and stadiums. On the Christchurch Stadium, this person says $50,000 for 5,000 seats is $10,000 a seat. How long will it take these seats to pay for themselves? Another person ties in the Christchurch situation with Auckland, saying the biggest city in Aotearoa is only expecting 20,000 people to the All Blacks game tomorrow, but Christchurch has just voted to spend $50 million extra to take their stadium up to a 30,000 person stadium. And as far as I can tell, there is no guarantee that there will be further increases. Another person says that doesn't make sense to me. I'm glad I'm not a Christchurch ratepayer. And this one says the Christchurch City Council has a list of names and addresses of 24,000 people who want the bigger 30,000 seat stadium. They can give a donation, $2,000 each. That's 48 million straight up.
RNZ News at 6. I'm Marama Tipole. Port of Tauranga's chairman says the country cannot afford another chaotic incident over COVID-19 like the one at the port last week. Port workers were allowed onto a foreign-flagged ship last week despite Maritime New Zealand warning an infected Australian pilot had also been on board. The workers were sent home but recalled the next day. When some of the ship's crew tested positive, nearly 100 workers also needed testing. David Pilkington says it was a mess.
It was very frustrating to have a number of government agencies involved and a number of mixed messages. And frankly, we can't continue to keep having these mistakes because, dare I say it, we dodged another bullet.
David Pilkington says a thorough investigation should have been done at the outset. The former chief executive of Ports of Auckland has been charged over the death of a stevedore. Tony Gibson quit in May after a report raised major safety concerns about the way the ports operate. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Maritime NZ yesterday revealed it had laid several charges against the ports and an individual over the death of Pala'amo Kalati last August. Mr Kalati was killed when a container fell and crushed him during an overnight shift. RNZ can today confirm that it's Tony Gibson who faces 2 health and safety charges and that he's employed a QC, John Billington, to represent him. A court date is yet to be set.
Residential construction costs have markedly increased and are expected to keep rising. CoreLogic's construction cost index jumped from 1.3% in the first quarter this year to 2.2% in the second, the biggest rise ever recorded. It takes the annual growth rate to 4.5%. CoreLogic's chief economist, Kelvin Davidson, says it's putting pressure on the construction sector.
I think there's more to come. This is a sector that's running at capacity, and we know from the high level of dwelling consents that are already in the pipeline that it's going to be busy for a couple of years yet at least, let alone any future demand that comes through.
Kelvin Davidson says rising costs may turn people off wanting to build a new home. New South Wales has had a new high in daily COVID-19 cases, recording 390 in the latest 24-hour period. 2 more people have also died with the virus, one of them a woman in her 40s. A third of the people infected with COVID-19 in the past week in the state are under 19. State Premier Gladys Berejiklian has expressed frustration over a handful of people who knowingly breached rules and forced lockdowns. She says, for example, that one person who knowingly did the wrong thing caused havoc in 7 or 8 local government areas in the west of the state. A car rally is about to get underway in Timaru in memory of the 5 teenagers killed in a crash last weekend. Those attending are being encouraged to bring their loudest cars to show how much the boys are missed. The police say they will maintain a visible presence to ensure everything is done safely. A petition organiser says he's delighted the Christchurch Council has reversed its decision to cut the capacity of a proposed stadium by 5,000 seats. Rob Hoff says the U-turn is a result of both public pressure and the lowered cost to $50 million from the $88 million first proposed. Mr Hoff's petition calling for the larger 30,000 seat option was signed by 24,000 Cantabrians. He says the seats will bring economic opportunities and more events.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a place for
Christchurch people and Canterburyans to be proud of, so they can take their family to and future generations for the next 30 to 50 or so years.
Rob Hoff says the investment will be worth it, even though modelling shows all the seats will be filled only 4 times a year. It's 6:04. To sports now, All Blacks captain Sam Whitelock has also welcomed the U-turn over the stadium's capacity. Whitelock, who played in the last All Blacks test at Lancaster Park in 2010, says a permanent replacement for the old venue has been a long time coming.
It's cool now that we've got a decision, and not sure if I'll play there, but hopefully it's made nice and quickly, and not just for sport but just the community in general. That'll definitely be a massive part of the rebuild.
Construction is expected to start next year and to be completed by the end of 2024. Veteran cricketer Susie Bates hasn't played a full game in almost a year and admits there's some trepidation as the White Ferns head off on their tour of England. Bates injured her shoulder playing against Australia in October last year and has been unable to play since.
Overwhelmingly excited, but also there's a little bit of nervousness there to get back out on the park, and we've had a lot of training camps, 5 training camps, and slowly building into the fielding and throwing.
The White Ferns' first match against England is early next month. And former New Zealand cricketer Chris Cairns remains in a serious but stable condition in intensive care at a Sydney hospital. A family spokesperson says there's no change in the condition of the 51-year-old who's had separate heart operations in Canberra and Sydney. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, writer, literary festival director and bass player Rachel King selects a mixtape. Country Life goes to Taihape to meet Curly Troon, champion gum boot thrower and chair of the New Zealand Boot Throwing Association. No bull. Mel Parsons is this week's Friday Night Live act, and because it's Friday the 13th, we are warding off superstition with a sonic tonic dedicated to good advice. So take mine and listen in after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Strong northwest winds affect many areas tomorrow. For Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Remaining rain, possibly heavy clearing, then mostly fine but isolated showers in the west. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the central high country and Hawke's Bay. Fine spells and isolated showers. Wellington and Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wairarapa, Marlborough and North Canterbury. Showers, possibly heavy with hail clearing this evening. Fine for tomorrow until a brief shower in the afternoon or evening. Nelson, Buller and Westland, a few showers mainly in the north. Then rain for a time tomorrow morning and afternoon, possibly heavy and thundery in the west. For South Canterbury and Otago, fine, apart from some scattered rain for a time tomorrow morning and afternoon. For Fiordland and Southland, mostly fine apart from showers in Fiordland. Showers and possible thunderstorms for tomorrow. And for the Kohu Chatham Islands, rain clearing tonight and returning tomorrow night. It's 6:06.
Nā mihi. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Central Auckland businesses fighting for survival are annoyed they're still waiting for government help as their takings take a massive hit. They're the Albert Street business owners who've unwittingly found themselves blocked off behind huge fences, forced to put up with endless roadworks outside of their front doors. They've had no compensation from the City Rail Link project and face this problem rolling on for years. The Transport Minister says a decision on financial help is coming, but also says their problems aren't from the CRL works alone. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
Shabana Ranchoji has heard it all before. Another politician, another promise, but still no payoff.
The majority of this project has been with Labour. So they've had more than enough time. Twyford, we even went to his offered, Mr. Twyford. We sent him beautiful flowers, Mr. Twyford. Nothing.
Transport Minister Michael Wood is the man with his hands on the CRL purse strings. For years, those trading alongside a huge trench on Albert Street barricaded behind large cage fences have wanted compensation for the ongoing disruption. It's not just the noise. They're also losing foot traffic as people around town avoid this clogged up construction zone. The business owners want to know when the government's going to help them.
I hope to be in a position to provide some certainty about whether we can provide some support in the very near future on that question.
Mr Wood also heaped blame on the last national government.
Well, ideally, I think we would have had something set up in the design of the CRL scheme from the beginning, which the previous government set up, but there was nothing set up in terms of compensation, and indeed in New Zealand, there is pretty much no history of building in compensation to these schemes. So we are having to come back and retrofit something into something that was set up some years ago.
He says the CRL isn't solely to blame for the business hit in this area.
There are some real challenges. Some of that is related to CRL disruption, but there have been other disruptions occurring in the central city as well. Obviously, the impact of the global pandemic, cruise ships, international students, and a general loss of business due to some of those conditions.
We played Mr Wood's comments back to Shabana Ranchoji, the co-owner of Albert Street's Roma Blooms. Safe to say she's far from impressed and is growing sick of words and no action.
Avoidance. He's just avoiding it. For me, I feel like the ministers, Auckland Council would say that until the project's done. They will keep us holding on to hope, a false hope. It's a false hope to us because nothing has happened.
Ms Ranchoji also doesn't want to hear a blame game between political parties.
It's not the Nats, it's nobody. It's whoever's who has got the responsibility at this present time to just listen or do the right thing.
And as for the suggestion CRL alone isn't to blame for the plight of business owners on this part of Albert Street.
We know that Michael Wood talked about other problems that are coming our way, just not the CRL. That's only, 5% of the 95% compared to the 95% what's happening at our doorstep.
In recent weeks, some of Ms Ranchoji's neighbours have shut up shop. Da Vinci Italian restaurant shut its doors in the last couple of weeks, while Taj Mahal Indian Eatery has also been cutting back its trading hours. Ms Ranchoji took this video diary of Da Vinci's owner Anthony Ariano before he left the street.
They have money to splash here, spend here, to destroy business like us and others, but to help, never, never ever.
For Roma Blooms, the constant noise, road layout changes and 2-metre high cage fences on their doorstep can mean they're forced to chuck out thousands of dollars worth of perishable flowers on any given day.
For us, our other effects are staff. I've had to let good staff go because of CRL.
Meanwhile, the minister remains adamant the government is moving as fast as it can in considering a $50 million compensation package pitched by Heart of the City.
We've been looking closely at what the justifications for compensation might be, how, for example, you would differentiate between the impact of the CRL versus other impacts that might have caused some difficulties for the businesses in question, how you would make sure, for example, that landlords are also stepping up and playing their part here, given that landlords stand to make windfall gains from the significant public investment.
In the meantime, who knows how many more bunches of roses and lilies Shabana Ranchoji will be forced to bin.
And you can check out that story from our two next. We'll put it up on our Facebook page. Oranga Tamariki was warned about harmful restraints at a Christchurch care and residence facility months before it was finally closed. The agency announced Te Oranga would close in July following an investigation by Newsroom revealing footage of staff tackling a young person to the ground. RNZ has obtained a monitoring report by the Office of the Children's Commissioner into Te Oranga, published in December last year. Our Youth Affairs reporter Katie Doyle has the story.
The words are written in bold. Children and young people are still being hurt during restraints. Highlighted in a December report by the Office of the Children's Commissioner into Te Oranga Care and Protection residents. The Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner, Glenys Phillip Barbara, says the residences hold people with complex needs.
They've often come from a background that's incredibly complicated and often traumatic. A young person who ends up in a care and protection residence has no other option for placement.
Oranga Tamariki announced it would close Te Oranga last month. It followed an investigation by Newsroom, revealing video footage of staff putting a boy in a headlock and throwing him to the ground. On the 1st of July, Oranga Tamariki Chief Executive Sir Wera Gardner had this to say.
Last night I informed the Minister for Children that the organisation will be closing our care and protection resident in Christchurch, Te Oranga. This decision comes after a number of serious issues involving staff and tamariki that have come to light over the past week.
But the OCC report shows serious issues at Te Oranga weren't new revelations. They had been documented 7 months earlier. The report talked about bullying, feelings of being unsafe, staff put-downs and inappropriate comments. Ms Philip Barbara says worries about care and protection residences stretch back years.
So we're pleased that action's been taken. But one of the reasons that we decided to publish our monitoring reports from now on is to ensure that there is a much more public eye on the concerns that we have.
Concerns about restraints are echoed in a March 2021 report into the Ipuni Care and Protection residence in Lower Hutt. Children and young people there thought staff were using force inappropriately. The word manhandled is used.
We believe that all care and protection residences should close. We're advocating for smaller community-based places, therapeutic in focus, tailored to the specific needs of young people in their care, and in some cases highly secure, so that young people who present a risk to themselves and others can be appropriately cared for.
One staff member in that report said Ipuni felt like a ward on a mental health unit, without the environment or training to match the need. Ms Philip Barbara says staff in other residences have similar concerns.
We've raised this issue about staff feeling and being often undertrained, and just the risk of harm that exposes young people to. This again has been a theme of our reports for many years.
Oranga Tamariki couldn't comment specifically on Te Oranga due to ongoing investigations. In a statement on restraints in care and protection residences, the agency said they should only be used in extreme circumstances. Part of that statement has been voiced.
Staff must use physical holds that are reasonable in the circumstances. When it is assessed that physical holds are necessary, it must be the least restrictive form necessary, and only applied for as long as necessary to prevent an individual harming themselves or others. Physical force must not be used when a less intrusive form of intervention is adequate.
The Oranga Tamariki statement says management debrief any staff who use restraints and carry out a review.
A man who stabbed his girlfriend to death and left her body in a burning car in South Auckland has been jailed for at least 12 years. Palmer Masters has been sentenced to life imprisonment after earlier pleading guilty to murdering 23-year-old Chantal Wiki O'Brien in November last year. Masters was on bail at the time and wasn't supposed to be in contact with Ms Wiki O'Brien after an earlier violent altercation. Our reporter Sarah Robson was in the High Court at Auckland.
Members of Chantal Wiki O'Brien's whānau faced down her killer in court.
You preyed on her, you manipulated her, you made her live with a life that was not good for her. You used her, you beat her over and over again.
They said Chantal Wiki O'Brien had been subjected to all sorts of violence during her 5-month relationship with 32-year-old Palmer Masters.
She had been thrown out of the car by you. She was a mess, physically and mentally. She had grazing to her arms, sides and back. I then noticed a real bad scar, not a fresh scar, and not that old.
Others spoke of the pain the death of a daughter, niece, sister and cousin has caused.
It's unforgivable. We've not been able to mourn her as us Māori do. No open casket, no laying in state at our marae.
Some read victim impact statements on behalf of other family members.
I miss her big smiley smile. It's my big sister so much. It makes me mad that I didn't have that moment to tell my sister I love you.
Chantal Wiki O'Brien's body was found in a burning car in South Auckland last November. Palmer Masters handed himself into the police at the cordon after emergency services arrived. Masters was on bail after being charged a week earlier over a family violence incident, sparked by an argument over Ms Wiki O'Brien's refusal to move in with him. Justice Walker said Masters put an extension cord around Ms Wiki O'Brien's neck, threw her to the ground, punched her in the face and pushed her out of a moving car.
As a result of this incident, which left Ms Wiki O'Brien bruised, grazed and sore, you were arrested. You appeared in the Manukau District Court on 23 October 2020. You were admitted to bail on the condition you did not associate with or contact Ms. Wiki O'Brien.
But that wasn't enough to protect her.
In flagrant disregard of the condition, on 3 November 2020, you contacted Ms. Wiki O'Brien, attempting to persuade her to drop the charges. You agreed to meet a short distance from her home. You picked her up from her address in Weymouth. You drove around Auckland together.
It's not known exactly when Chantal Wiki O'Brien was killed.
At some point between that time and 3 o'clock the next morning, you stabbed Ms. Wiki O'Brien at least 3 times in the chest. The wounds were inflicted with considerable force.
Palmer Masters parked his car on the side of the road with Chantal Wiki O'Brien's body on the passenger seat and set it alight. Masters pleaded guilty to murder in June. He also pleaded guilty to the charges he faced over the earlier incident. As well as the life sentence with a minimum non-parole period of 12 years, he was handed a concurrent 20-month sentence on the other charges.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As new COVID-19 cases spread across Australia, there's growing concern lockdowns just aren't working. The city of Sydney has been under a form of lockdown since June, yet daily case numbers are at their highest. 390 were recorded today. The ABC's Gavin Coote filed this report.
A 7-day COVID lockdown is now underway in the city after the ACT recorded the first.
Once considered a model for controlling the spread of COVID-19, the Delta variant is causing havoc in Australia, with large cities and country towns going into snap lockdowns.
Stay-at-home orders now apply to the local government areas of Walgett, Bogan, Bourke.
Strict lockdown rules are now in effect for 3 additional council areas in Greater Sydney, bringing the total to 12.
The response has shifted dramatically since the New South Wales government was slow to impose tight restrictions on Sydney. And with only 24% of people over the age of 16 fully vaccinated, University of Queensland infectious diseases expert Linda Selvey believes lockdowns are still the best tool we have for responding to flare-ups.
Well, I think there's good evidence that there's a chance that it can control Delta. I think how soon it's imposed is an important part of it, but there's also probably an element of chance there because we know that not everybody follows the lockdown and not everybody can, for example, if they're essential workers.
The Delta variant is encouraging more people to get vaccinated. The Federal Department of Health has released new research showing 80% of Australians intend to receive a vaccine or already had. That's up 10% since April. Associate Professor Margie Danchin is a vaccines expert with the Murdoch Children's Research Institute.
Obviously, people are more concerned about the severity of the disease. So I think the direct impact of Delta and COVID on them is more real now. And that has been a bit of an issue up until now, that people just don't really think they're going to get sick.
The research also shows the top concern about vaccines is uncertainty about their long-term side effects. But Margie Danchin cautions against thinking vaccines alone are the solution.
I do think we need to be very clear in our messaging with the community that getting high vaccination coverage is only part of our ticket out of the pandemic. I think from the Doherty modelling, they were very clear that we're aiming for hopefully 70 to 80% of the adult population vaccinated by the end of November or certainly the end of the year, but that we're still going to need those public health strategies alongside to suppress the virus in the community. So masks and still potentially, snap lockdowns, unfortunately, although of course the risk of that will decrease.
As for whether employers can make their workers get vaccinated, the Fair Work Ombudsman has updated its advice. It says the pandemic doesn't automatically make it reasonable for companies to direct employees to get a vaccine and is recommending businesses get legal advice if considering making it mandatory.
And it was revealed today that 1 in 3 people infected with COVID-19 in the past week in New South Wales are under 19 years old. At least 10 people are under 40 and are currently in intensive care in Sydney with COVID-19. A push for COVID vaccine booster shots is happening in the US. Daily cases continue to rise, well over 150,000, and transmission of the Delta variant is being seen right across the country. As CNN's Nick Watt reports, the drug agency is voting on whether to authorise third doses for many Americans.
The FDA expected very soon to green light an additional vaccine shot.
for the immunocompromised.
That actually encompasses a relatively small proportion of the population, around 3% or so.
So what about boosters for the rest of us?
We believe sooner or later you will need a booster for durability of protection. We are preparing for the eventuality of doing that.
Meantime, in Franklin, Tennessee,
you can leave freely, but we will find you, and we know who you are. Be allowed in public again.
After a school board vote for a mask mandate, members, doctors, nurses harassed. The president saw this video.
Our healthcare workers are heroes. To the mayors, school superintendents, educators, local leaders who are standing up to the governors politicizing mask protection for our kids. Thank you. Thank you as well. Thank God that we have heroes like you. And I stand with you all.
Thousands of kids, largely in the south, already sent home back to virtual school. Why? Exposure and or high case counts where they live.
Masking is, I think a lot of us would say, something pretty small that we can do in order to prevent all these negative consequences.
Nearly 99% of the US population lives in counties where people should be wearing masks indoors, according to new CDC guidance.
Now to Greece, where for more than 9 days, thousands of firefighters have struggled to contain raging wildfires. The flames have been fanned by the country's most severe heatwave in decades, with many villages forced to evacuate. Firefighters from other countries have joined the effort, as the BBC's Bethany Bell reports.
British firefighters cut down smouldering shrubs on the edge of an olive grove in Arcadia. The team has been creating fire breaks between the burnt areas and the surviving trees in order to stop more fires from spreading. Danny Scott from Liverpool says the danger of flare-ups remains.
They're just trying to get access to the road. You can see behind us that there's a tree come down, so they've got no access for the locals or water. There's a couple of houses as well above us, so we just want to make sure that they're all right, try and protect them from the fire spread. But our first priority is to sort this tree out that's fallen over.
So what's the danger right now here?
The fire reigniting, so there's still a lot of hot spots, it's still smouldering away, there's hot embers, and if the wind picks up it can move them to areas that haven't been burnt, and then it'll just all set alight again.
I'm in an olive grove and the fire must have swept through here. You can see blackened tree trunks and there's white ash everywhere. The ground underneath my feet is still quite hot to walk on. Every so often you see smouldering embers, and that's what makes the risk of flare-ups so very dangerous. And a little way away I can see a flock of sheep. They were lucky to escape the blaze. We lent the team our drone to give them an idea of the lay of the land. Tony Brown, the UK team commander, says the extent of the destruction is huge.
In 27 years in the fire service, I've never seen anything on this kind of scale. I've been to lots of places overseas to wide area floods, but nothing on this compared to this scale. As you can see, the valley and the mountains are burned, and there's no comparison for me.
The All Blacks can wrap up the Bledisloe Cup tomorrow night for the 19th straight year with another victory over the Wallabies. The Australians are in a must-win situation to force a Bledisloe Cup decider in Perth on August 28th. All Blacks captain Sam Whitelock says sealing the series at home is important and they can't let the Wallabies back into the game like they did last week.
It's a final for us too, so they did finish strong and we allowed them to. But with that, we've got to make sure that we don't give easy outs. Obviously, discipline we talked around at the start, so that's one thing. We've got to make sure we nullify that and then we can keep our game going.
So far, Aucklanders haven't got behind a second game in 2 weeks against the Australians at Eden Park. Ticket sales have been slow and are unlikely to reach the 47,000 who are in the stadium to watch the opening win of the series. Fewer fans in the stands could work in the Wallabies' favour as they try to break their losing streak. Wallabies captain Michael Hooper says despite there being limited Australian supporters among a small New Zealand crowd, the Wallabies are still feeling the support from across the ditch.
I always say it, but it's great in Australia when you play a good game and then the jerseys come out the next morning, and there's people walking their dogs or down and wearing the Wallaby gold. Unfortunately, with lockdown, I don't know how many people can do that at the moment. So, hoping for that in their living rooms and with families or over Zooms or, however people are catching up to watch the game. But, we've been feeling, greatly supported away from home. It's been tough. It's been tough for us. There's every person, staff and player in the team has their challenges, like everyone else in the world at the moment.
And that was Wallabies captain Michael Hooper. Kick-off is at 7:05 tomorrow. And while we're on the subject of the rugby, some of you have been getting in touch. This is around the ticket sales. This person says, I was at the All Blacks game last weekend with 4 friends. It was awesome to be at Eden Park, everyone having a good time. If we had known there would be a 2 in a row up here, we might have booked for this week instead. It's hard to go 2 weekends in a row financially, and that along with the late change to Auckland versus Wellington won't be helping. Good on them for doing what they can to fill seats. This listener has a different view. Eden Park catering, they say. Drinks and food options. As an experience, I would rate it 2 out of 10, they reckon. On the subject of Lord of the Rings, the series going offshore with Amazon, they say Amazon came, they spent, they got what tax breaks they were entitled to, which was part of the reason they came here, and now they've left. Anyone who thought they had any particular loyalty to anything other than money was kidding themselves. No need for hurt feelings, they say. That's pretty much all we've got time for. Nights and Lately will keep you up to date throughout the night. Kia pai tōpō. Have a great evening. We'll be back Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Port of Tauranga's chairman says a thorough investigation should have been done before allowing workers onto a COVID-19 infected ship last week. The former chief executive of Ports of Auckland has been charged over the death of a stevedore. A petition organiser says building a 30,000-seat multi-use stadium in Christchurch will be worth the investment in the long run. An economist says people may be turned off from building a new home because of rising construction costs. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Equity should be the driver for our vaccination program. We need to keep a focus that we are not missing out members of our community.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
I mean, we understand the rationale for business, but I think our issue with the trial is that the government is giving precedence to those that are vaccinated in New Zealand.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Karen, and I'm Brian Crump getting ready for another night on RNZ National, which will come